Adelaide Advertiser reported that there were 22 children treated between 2023 and 2024 who were approved for gender transitioning without psychiatric assessment. Were you notified of that formally by SA Health?
Alan Singh, National Health Medical Research Council. No, Senator, but I might mention that our role in this matter is to produce guidelines, and so there is no obligation for states to inform us of that sort of information.
And just to clarify, there are currently no formal guidelines in terms of...
There are no NHMRC approved guidelines relating to gender dysphoria.
Okay, so if we've got gender clinics that are using standards of care, and we've got instances where there have been children, and in this case the youngest was 11, who are being treated without any guidelines existing, do you accept that that is, and we're not expecting to see this review come up with anything until mid next year is my understanding, do you concede that that might be problematic in terms of the care of young people in Australia?
Senator, if I can just comment, we did this quite extensively earlier. There are no national guidelines, but the point that was made by Dr. Devlin and others that there are other clinical guidelines from professional bodies and others. So I think maybe Dr. Devlin might want to restate some of that evidence.
And I understand if there are no guidelines though, and we've got clinics that aren't even following their own, I guess, duties of care that they have by not fulfilling things like psychiatric assessments, there's clearly gaps in the system, and young people are, you know, I guess, receiving treatment that they're not even being assessed for, which is really disturbing.
So, Dr. Devlin?
Senator, so the guidelines have evolved from the professional bodies that are providing these expert services. It's not unusual in an area of practice which is evolving, which gender dysphoria services are an evolving service, that these guidelines are developed by the expertise and the professional groups who are providing the services, and now we've been asked that the NHMRC provide that sort of national guidance. In response to the notion of best practice, certainly the guidelines that many of the services which are provided by the states and territories are operating under, there is a sense, they're very clear that multidisciplinary care is particularly important for this. So that might include psychiatric or psychological services, social workers, those sorts of things. So there is a sense that there should be a team wrapped around these children and their families.
I'm not disputing any of that. What I'm saying is these teams clearly aren't working together, and children are being prescribed medications that, you know, we've recently had a federal court decision where Justice Strum basically endorsed the CAS review, and he ruled basically that the risk of harm of puberty blockers was considered unacceptable. So I guess what I'm looking at is there's a whole lot of young people. We're not expecting to have any official guidelines or even interim guidelines in place until next year. What happens to all of the young people between now and then, because they're being harmed currently?
Senator, I wouldn't accept some of the assertions around the children are being harmed. I would point you to the Medical Journal of Australia only 2 days ago released an interesting study which was an Australian perspective on the CAS review, and it did demonstrate that some of the comments in the CAS review are not relevant in the Australian context in the notion of the services, and it did actually suggest that some of the findings of the CAS review weren't accepted by the sort of expertise in Australia. So that might be an interesting study for us to think about going forward. In terms of what is happening now, the states and territories are offering these services under their clinical governance models, and they are responsible for ensuring the clinical governance of their services and that their health professionals are operating to their appropriate scopes of practice. So it is a matter for the states and territories in terms of the quality and safety of the services that they offer their community.
Okay, and will the, I guess... Okay, so are puberty blockers being considered to be listed on the PBS for under 18-year-olds?
That's the PBS team would need to answer that question for you in terms of what pharmaceutical sponsors may have brought forward those medications.
Are they here now to be able to answer that?
Yes, they are.
While we're waiting, I mean, the Minister has asked the NHMRC to provide interim guidance on puberty blockers by the middle of next year. So that is our intention, and that guidance will be available by that time.
Okay. And my understanding is that was urgent advice that the Minister had requested.
Yeah.
Do you think the timeline meets the definition of urgent in your view when we've got young people who are being treated with no formal overarching national guidelines currently?
I think that we need to make sure that we get the answer right, that we look at all evidence, that we look at it in the Australian context, and that we take evidence from a large number of people, including people with lived experience, in order to come up with that answer. And so I think that time actually is the right amount of time, and is actually quite short.
The officer here, with respect to PBS, is not aware of the answer, but we have PBS under outcome 2, so we'll endeavour to come back with a specific answer to your question then.
Thank you.
Thank you.